So I had a very unique opportunity actually yesterday. It was kind of out of nowhere where I got contacted by someone I knew because I couldn't go to the Dungeons and Dragons short movie thing, the early viewing. So what ended up happening, someone was like, "Hey, I got a viewing situation for you here." I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Yo, I got you. Let's go see this Dungeons and Dragons." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I was like, "Well, I ain't got the dough for it." They're like, "Nah, free." I was like, "Oh, all right, let's go." So I ended up seeing the Dungeons and Dragons movie with somebody. They are in the movie industry or whatever, so sometimes they get to do certain things. This person that I've seen some films before with early. So, but I can't reveal who they are. So I actually saw the movie, and I'm going to break it down. For one, there is a great cameo in the movie that I was very pleased about that I caught. But it's not exactly a blink if you miss it, but you need to pay attention because it's a really high situation going on. Now, this movie stands alone from the previous 3 Dungeons and Dragons movies, which I don't think a lot of people realize the previous 3 Dungeons and Dragons movies were still connected. Because one of the villains from the first film did show up in Wrath of the Dragon God. And then you also had the third one, which was the Hand of Vecna, which is not easy to get your hands on all the time. I did see it. They did some weird stuff in that one. Like, they were like, "Hey, you buy this sword and it's a +3 constitution." It's like, that's not how you do that. It's supposed to be treated like, "Hey, this is the way it's built and it gives you this." Like, you know what I mean? So, and after the emasculation of the leading man story, I was a little thrown as to what I was going to get. It looked good when I saw from the trailer, and lo and behold, I have to admit, the movie is impressive. So they did reference, and I think this world, they mentioned Baldur's Gate. You do get to see a place, so it sounds like they talked about Neverwinter, and they also... which if you play D&D, you can tell, where one of the places they were in, is technically the, Underdark. So, they did touch on, a few of those things there. The Paladin made sense for what they did. My suspicions were correct on who the Paladin is, or I should say what the Paladin represented. Because I've actually had D&D campaigns where they do this. And all in all, it felt like a really cool D&D campaign with people talking and dealing, but not in the sense of we're playing around the table, in the sense of in your head when you're in that world, how you would view yourself, how you would view the characters. They had great establishment, how the team formed felt like Dungeons and Dragons. For some of the stuff that they were dealing with, felt like Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I gotta give it to them. The characters were very well fleshed out. They fit what they did. Chris Pine is able to be funny, but not trying to be funny. It's just the way he presents and how he says things. And it actually works really well. And they gave a mission, they gave a story. And it was very straightforward, but it worked. To me, the CG was okay. I know some people like CG was horrible. Some of the CG wasn't the greatest, but some of it actually was fine. I thought some of the CG worked. What they did, I'm okay with where it was. Unlike Marvel Phase 4 with the biggest studio in the world, with the biggest movie franchise in the world, you have no excuses. I personally will say there is CG in this movie that was better than what I've seen in some of the previous Marvel films. And that's sad. And the previous Marvel projects. It all looked better than how She-Hulk looked. Unless She-Hulk was behind a green screen, then she fit perfectly. There wasn't a lot of Uncanny Valley. There was some stuff there. How they did, like, the Displacer Beast was awesome. In one campaign, I actually had a Displacer Beast as an extra pet. Long story, because I was a hunter that dealt with, or I was a ranger that actually had pets beasts. And I had 2 of them, and one of them ended up being a displacer beast. So that was so cool to see how the displacer beast did things, to see the gelatinous cube, to see how they made this thing work, the way things fell from one thing to another. It was very, very interesting. A lot of heartfeltness, like, things to it. A wonderful story. Reason why the bard is a certain way. And I looked up his character sheet, and yes, there is apparently a character info, because the type of bard he was. I was like, oh, okay, you're this type. Holga was good, and it made sense. The characters who were supposed to do the thing I was like really agitated about, because I was like, this should have been, it was that way. They had a wizard doing an attuning thing, and you can definitely tell it was like based off of a role thing, because I actually remember playing one time and someone had to attune an item, and that was interesting, because it reminded me of that. Holga and how she's the barbarian. She does her barbarian thing. You know, him being the Eldrin, which is Chris Pine's character, being the face of the party. How they did the druid, which after watching her, I think she's definitely a moonlight druid, tiefling. They had some other races, creatures, things all throughout, and I thought it was a very well done, very put together story. So for all the crap that Hasbro has done, I can say that this felt like its own. It didn't feel like it was trying to be the next, for people to say, the next Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or anything like that. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of all Lord of the Rings, even though I do really like the Hobbit movies. It felt like a D&D thing. It felt like they knew what they were doing, and what you wanted from a Dungeons and Dragons movie, you got. A really cool adventure set in the world, and if these players were doing it, this is what they would be. It kind of reminds you of like Legend of Vox Machina, where it's like, okay, here's this, here's what it is, high adventure. They sounded like people who would talk around the table and how they would do their characters. So it was very enjoyable. It was genuinely funny. Some parts were very funny. What they did was they made the guys have some of the jokes, the slapstick jokes, but it actually worked, because I didn't feel like Chris Pine was emasculated the way they said it, or the wizard. I felt like they were dealing with their own thing. And a bard, I'm not expecting a bard to be the guy to just go in there and go, I'm in the fray now. I expect a bard to do bard stuff. They're more of a face of the party kind of thing, and that's how it fit. So all in all, I will have to say, for nothing else, I actually thoroughly enjoyed the movie. And it's not because I would see it free, that had nothing to do with it. It wasn't like some promotion or something. It's literally someone I knew. They said, hey, I got an extra spot. That wouldn't have changed if it was terrible. I would have said it was terrible. But yeah, so really good. I say it was a really good time. I'm definitely going to own it. And I know they're talking about doing some kind of spin-off series. I don't know if it's going to be with the same actors or if they're going to do something, but where they left it, they could legitimately leave it there, do another movie with another campaign or another set of people. And I think it would still work if they keep this same kind of energy. Hope, if they do the spin-off, hopefully it'll follow, the characters, but I feel like this is the right path. This is the right track, and they can actually expand from this, and maybe they can salvage the destruction of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and all the things they've screwed up between Magic and everything else. From what I'm hearing, they're like race swapping characters in Lord of the Rings now. I think one of them was Aragorn. I don't know. I saw like an image of it, which is like, means they still haven't learned their lesson yet. That you just need to tell a good story. But I didn't feel like the men, I felt like the men, like I said, were jokey, but they weren't like, you're terrible at what you do. Like, you actually saw character growth. And also how this particular, how the wizard worked. Also, too, like I said, the paladin was a beast. So, that's all I gotta say. I had a good time. If you want to check it out, catch a matinee. If you don't want to give them money, that's fine, too. Now that I've, seen it the way I seen it, I gotta admit it. I had a really good time watching it, and it was a very entertaining movie. So, keep protagonists. You stay safe, you stay healthy, you stay real. and I'll see you.